In a small hotel room overlooking Broadway, that strip of street punctuated by spectacular signs proclaiming Gone with the Wind and other super epics, lies an old, ill man who is one of the progenitors of Hollywood of today. His name is Edwin S. Porter, inventor with Edison of the first movie camera, creator of the quote-unquote first story film, and collaborator in early experiments with sound on the film and color photography. He is in his 70s today, white-haired and practically forgotten. His career and accomplishments, on which the great glamour industry of the world is based, have truly, as the Broadway sign beneath his window reiterates, gone with the wind, writes New York Times reporter Ezra Goodman. Now, as long as his catalog of works and events like the Porter Film Fest exist, Edwin S. Porter, I assure you, will never ever be forgotten. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Edwin S. Porter Theater and the Golden Silent Films podcast. This is our much-anticipated return trip to Western Pennsylvania and the Pittsburgh area after a year of being on the road around the world talking about silent film. Now, this episode is doubly cool since it combines the shared film history of Western Pennsylvania and Santa Claus as we look at 1905's The Night Before Christmas, directed by Connellsville native Edwin S. Porter. Before we chat about the amazing night that was at the Edwin S. Porter Film Fest, let's talk about the usual Golden Silent Films podcast social media outlets. As usual, head on over to Golden Silence Cast on Instagram for up-to-date info on this little show. And for all of you folks on X or Twitter, just follow at Golden Silence 1 or just search for Golden Silence Cast and we ought to pop up. All of these screen names and sites will be in the episode description in case you are interested in checking us out. We are actually also now on Bluesky. By just searching Golden Silence Cast, you will definitely find us there as well. We would love to have you floating along this journey with us. At both social spaces, you'll get behind-the-scenes pics and info, upcoming episode reveals, and other fun film-related materials. And obviously, cool photos of our podcats, Soda and Gizmo, whose stockings right at this very second have been hung by the chimney with care. Also, if you're listening to this program on Spotify or Apple Podcast, have your workshop of elves leave reviews, ratings, or both. Our show has been around for over 5 years now, and we have only gotten 15 reviews on iTunes. We would love to see that number keep inching up, and you awesome silent film fans out there can do your part. All of those ratings and reviews help us so much. So live your best review leaving life and help our show grow a bit and reach those fellow silent film fans who have not heard of us yet. Hopefully we've stayed off the naughty list, so gifting us those reviews gives us more exposure in the world of podcasts and lets us know how we can improve. As always, we are grateful for the feedback and always want to bring you the best show on this side of the North Pole. And do subscribe to the Golden Silent Films podcast. While our output can be spotty, if you are subscribed, you will never miss an episode, and the moment new content drops, it's going to go straight to your listening device of choice. Now we're finishing up the year here, finishing up the season, and we don't want you to miss a second of what is to come in what is surely going to be a big 2025. Now that we've covered the audio side of things, let's take a quick moment to remind all of you out there of our new presence on YouTube. We have started putting past episodes out there for your streaming pleasure. Whether these past gems are new to you or you want to relive past movie discussions, just search for Golden Silent Films Podcast and we will pop right up. Since we are new to YouTube, please do us a solid and click on over and like and subscribe. We hear it's what all the cool YouTubers are asking for. And if I remember correctly, also hit that notification bell. It's all about the engagement and algorithms with this show. We're old and technically inept, so be cool, be nice, give us a little positive reinforcement, and give our fledgling channel a once-over. Thank you all so very much for supporting us on all our various platforms. Now, speaking of new platforms for the show, the Golden Silent Films podcast is also now on Amazon Music. Much like YouTube, Amazon Music is a new world for us, and we want to be able to be available for all the film fans out there wherever they consume their content. Whether it's an iPod, a phone, a computer, or now your Kindle, we want to share the magic of silent film with you. So, in summation, if you have Amazon Music, if you have YouTube, if you have iTunes, anything that you can listen to a podcast on, give us a follow, a like, and a listen. Now, if there's one thing we love here at the Golden Silent Films podcast, it's a great film festival. Whether it's been in Columbus or closer to home here in Pittsburgh, we can't pass up a long list of films to watch. They're always so much fun and, in our experience, open our eyes to great films we may have never even seen or heard of before. Now, it's pretty obvious when you go to a film fest, you catch really great films. No mystery there, right? But another great benefit to an awesome film festival is being surrounded by a bunch of like-minded folks who share an interest in those same things you love. Whether it's comics, horror movies, or Star Trek, being around like-minded individuals really allows you to be yourself and examine the things you love through the eyes of others. It really is amazing, amazing experience. When we heard the Porter Film Fest was in the works, missing it literally was not an option. The chance to explore a new town and meet new people all while watching the silent films we love so much was a can't-miss life experience. Now, as time passed, we could really see the love and care being put into this endeavor by the organizer, Frank Jacobianski. Any festival, conference, or show takes so much planning and hard work, and when we saw what was planned for this one, it was just overflowing with that love and civic pride and focused on the incredible Edwin S. Porter. Every time a new feature or bonus was announced, our anticipation just grew. If there was one person who deserved a dedicated festival of films, it was this legendary son of Connellsville, though he would hardly want to be introduced like that. Another way to introduce Porter is through the tried and true Golden Silent Films podcast biography segment. So at this point, in case you haven't been paying attention, the story of pioneering filmmaker Edwin S. Porter begins in Connellsville, Pennsylvania. Porter was born on April 21st, 1870. He was born and raised there in Connellsville, the son of Thomas and Mary Clark Porter. Now, it was a big family with young Edwin, the fourth of 7 children. He attended public school in Connellsville, and as he grew, he would graduate into the working world. Porter went from job to job, learning new skills and cultivating a wide variety of interests. And to say his employment history was varied is an understatement. Porter worked a bunch of odd jobs, but nothing really fully captured his imagination. And while nothing ever really stuck, he did learn a lot along the way. Now, some of these early occupations included being a plumber, an exhibition skater, a sign painter, and even a telegraph operator. On top of all that, he developed an interest in electricity at a young age, including he would eventually share a patent at the age of 21 for a lamp regulator. Now, he eventually took up tailoring, only to have that business suffer from outside economic circumstances. Now, with a lack of direction, the future director filed for bankruptcy on June 15th before enlisting in the United States Navy on June 19th. Now, while he was in the service, he served 3 years as a gunner's mate, serving on the USS New York at the Brooklyn Naval Yard. Now, as Porter adjusted to a post-military life, he returned to the field that brought him some measure of success in the past. That would be the wild, woolly world of electricity. He initially found employment in the electrical department of William Cramp and Sons, a Philadelphia ship and engine building company. During his 3 years of service, he showed an aptitude as an inventor of electrical devices to improve communications. Now, the burgeoning film industry at this time was in dire need of good technicians willing to apply their expertise to push this medium even more mainstream. Now, Porter was a solid, logical guy who saw this industry as a way to continue to invent and experiment. In the June 2nd, 1940 edition of the New York Times, Ezra Goodman writes, "When he entered pictures in 1896, a mere youth of 21, the burgeoning screen was the stepchild of the arts, commanding little or no respect among the so-called intellectuals. Aside from Edison himself, almost all of the handful of workers in the field were untutored individuals, attracted to the screen as a hazardous and possibly prosperous venture. Porter was one of the few exceptions. He brought to his work at Edison's plant in Orange a comprehensive schooling acquired in his hometown of Pittsburgh and through extensive work experience." Now, Porter had a knack for great timing. I mean, he really couldn't have gotten into the business at a better time. You see, this was the very ground floor, with movies recently graduating from Nickelodeons to actual big screens here in the States. He was briefly employed by New York City by Raff and Gammon, agents for the films and viewing equipment made by Thomas Edison. And then he left to become a touring projectionist with a competing machine by Kuhn, that would be Kuhn and Webster's projectorscope. He traveled through the West Indies and South America, showing films at fairgrounds and in open fields. He later would make a second tour through Canada and the United States. Now, Edwin S. Porter was a real proponent of what film could do. Though he was never particularly super into content creation, he loved the machinery, he loved the mechanisms that this new art form came from. There was so much room for innovation, and Porter would be the man at the right place at the right time. Porter would return to New York City in early 1898, finding work at the Eden Musée, a Manhattan wax museum and amusement hall, which had become a center for motion picture exhibition and production, and licensee of the Edison Manufacturing Company. While at the Eden Musée, Porter worked assembling programs of Edison films, most particularly exhibitions of films of the Spanish-American War. Now, the Edison Manufacturing Company wasted no time in bringing this super creative, super dedicated, super filled with ideas director on board in November of 1900. Not long after that, we would see Porter take command of motion picture production at Edison's New York studios, operating the camera, directing the actors, and assembling the final prints. Now, Porter would recount those early years with Edison and film in general when he said, "It was not until 3 years after I went to work for Edison that pictures were projected on a screen at all," the director reminisced, before continuing, "At first the public flocked to see this new novelty, but the appeal soon wore off, and many of the vaudeville houses and theaters where pictures were being shown as addenda to the regular bills began to drop these programs. I felt that there was nothing wrong with the screen itself, but that the public was becoming tired of the short, single-scene type of newsreel films that predominated then. From laboratory examination of some of the popular story films of the French pioneer director Méliès, I came to the conclusion that a picture telling a story in continuity form might draw the customers back to the theaters, and set to work in this direction." Over the next decade, Porter became one of, if not the most influential filmmakers in the United States. From his experience gained as a touring projectionist, Porter knew what pleased crowds, and a pleased crowd is a paying crowd. Now, to really wow the crowds, Porter started making trick films and comedies for Edison. One of his early films was Terrible Teddy the Grizzly King, a satire made in February of 1901 about then Vice President-elect Theodore Roosevelt. Now, one thing we've learned about Porter is that he was a knowledge sponge. He took every job and interest he had and applied that to his life going forward. He was a real student of the game, and in the cinematic world specifically, he was greatly inspired by his contemporaries in the film world. But he didn't just take ideas. He saw really cool concepts and ran them through his brain and improved upon them and gave American audiences something they'd really never seen before to that point. The experimentation of Porter would turn out several filmmaking staples of today that were unheard of back then. In 1903's The Life of an American Fireman, Porter was the first filmmaker to tell a story from multiple points of view. But that wasn't the only breakthrough concept at work in this film. According to ExploreHistory.com, we read, in his 1903 breakthrough film, The Life of an American Fireman, Porter told a 12-minute story, a length then unheard of, by connecting several scenes of continuous staged action and joining them to real scenes of fires, a dream sequence, and a remarkable finale that showed the same daring rescue twice, once from outside the burning building and again from the inside. Then the week before Christmas, between acts in a Manhattan vaudeville house, he debuted the American motion picture industry's first undisputed masterpiece. Now, if you don't know, that masterpiece would be The Great Train Robbery. And in that Great Train Robbery film, Porter combined three techniques rarely used prior. These would be the use of dramatic editing, cross-cut of scenes, and filming on location. All things that we don't bat an eyelash at today, but back in the early 1900s, this was some pretty heady stuff. Pretty unbelievable and Very surprising to see on screen. Now, after his discoveries and innovations weren't limited to the screen itself. He would also receive several patents for film-related inventions over the course of his incredible career. As successful as the collaboration with Edison was, all good things must come to an end, and Porter eventually left Edison to blaze his own trail. Ezra Goodman writes, after being in charge of the Edison studio for more than 10 years and turning out hundreds of short films, many of them vital social import, Porter left to form his own company, Rex, in 1909, and to become the leader of the independent producers. It was this era of Porter where he really started to push himself into a bit of a mogul, after years of camera work. Porter grew weary of the studio treadmill he was on. He wanted to break out on his own, call his own shots. He purchased the American rights to Sarah Bernhardt's three-reel Queen Elizabeth. He followed that up by starting a partnership with Adolf Zukor in the formation of the Famous Players Company. Porter's first production under the Famous Players banner was The Prisoner of Zenda in 1913, the first 6-reel film ever made, according to the New York Times. Now, we've immersed ourselves in the life of Edwin S. Porter, so let's talk about how his life and works were celebrated in his hometown of Connellsville. Now, before we get all yuletide around here, let's not forget the reason for the season. Wait, scratch that rewind. Let's not forget the reason for this episode. We are gathered here to listen to and learn about the works of Edwin S. Porter. He is a true film pioneer, more than worthy of an episode of the Golden Silent Films podcast. In fact, better yet, the man is worthy of an entire film festival in his honor. And where better to have that first ever Porter Film Fest than in the Edwin S. Porter Theater in his hometown of Connellsville, Pennsylvania. Now, this film festival was an event that we here at the podcast home office had been following and excited about since we first heard it was in the planning stages. There was so much to be excited about, from the list of films being screened to the live musical accompaniment. We were sold. We were in. Nothing more to tell us. And to be able to experience it in such a great location with so many like-minded individuals made it a cinematic event like no other. Even though our World Tour 24 has brought us back home to Pennsylvania, there is no reason to hurry and stop the travel-centric content and its connections to silent film. For the first ever annual Porter Film Fest, we will be heading to the aforementioned Connellsville, roughly 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh. Now, the history of this town goes back to the French and Indian War, when British Army troops commanded by General Edward Braddock made their way toward Fort Duquesne. They crossed the Youghiogheny River at Stewart's Crossing, which is now the town of Connellsville. You know, any place named Stewart's Crossing was going to have to be included in the show. Now, Connellsville was officially founded as a township in 1793, then as a borough in March 1st, 1806, by Zachariah Connell, a militia captain during the American Revolution. Now, there's a lot of great history surrounding Connellsville, but at the end of the day, we are here to celebrate one of its most prestigious native sons, Edwin S. Porter. Earlier, we talked about what made Porter so special, so it's only fitting that we dive into why the Porter Film Fest was so special itself. With the Christmas movie breakdown tossed in for good measure, yes, that is on its way. Now, this awesome event took place on Saturday, September 7th, 2024. Mother Nature must have been a fan of silent movies because it was a gorgeous day in quaint small-town America. Now, the Film Fest was going down at the Edwin S. Porter Theater inside the town's community center. This historic 3-story brick building was built in 1916 as Connellsville High School. Upon entering the community center, you could feel an excitement, a positivity in the air. Also in the air was the smell of amazing food served as part of the night's festivities. The decor for the event was also top-notch, evoking the feeling of old Hollywood class and glamour. Adding to the fact that the building was built and architected, architected is not a word, but the building was built in 1919, though there have been renovations and changes since. It really puts you in the silent era. It retained enough of its original charm to transport you, even if just for one night. Now, the theme of classic film followed you throughout the bustling hallways. Every turn brought more reminders of the magic of the silent era. Whether it was assorted movie posters featuring the evening's entertainment, or facts about silent movie production, The immersion was on point. I'm sure a lot of folks were experiencing silence for the first time, and this decor certainly did its job in imparting some great information. And the info wasn't just about the wider world of silent film production. This is the Porter Film Fest, after all. Everywhere you look were pictures, portraits, and other various nods to the Connellsville native, including a newly minted historical marker celebrating Porter. His name also carried over into the realm of alcoholic beverages, but we will get into that tasty bit a little bit later. Now, with our food and wine consumed and the atmosphere fully absorbed, we made our way to the balcony of the Edwin S. Porter Theater. Now, say what you will, call me a stickler, but if you're not watching a silent movie in 100-year-old, hard, narrow, incredibly uncomfortable seats, are you even experiencing silent film properly? I jest, but people's bodies in the 20s were of a sturdier constitution than mine, I suppose. Now, once the show began, any seat discomfort floated away as the sounds of the Peacherine Ragtime Society Orchestra floated in. If the name Peacherine Ragtime Society Orchestra is new to you, like it was to us, here is a quick primer. The PRSO is one of the leading ragtime orchestras in the United States. The Baltimore-based group is conducted and directed by Andrew Green, the group's founder. They recreate the music of a bygone era, ragtime, theater, and dance hall, as well as scoring classic silent movies. A real Swiss Army knife of music, if you will. Their music comes from the 15,000-piece personal collection of Andrew Green. As has been mentioned before, the immersive nature of this event was pretty rad. The PRSO added to that with their musical stylings, recreating the experience of watching a silent movie at your local movie house. The orchestra started things off with an overture to start things, to get everyone in the mood, to kind of set the scene that you are at a silent movie. Now, this particular overture was a piece called More Candy, written by Mel B. Kaufman and originally released in 1917. This was a fun start and really got the audience jazzed for the historical content in films and music to follow. Now, speaking of those historic films, let's start with one of the most famous and groundbreaking films of the early silent era. It is 1903's The Great Train Robbery, a real gem in the cap of Edwin S. Porter. It was filmed and directed by Porter, with Edison Manufacturing handling the finances and distribution. This short is really the stuff of legend and perfect to see on screen for the first time after years of watching it on televisions and small computer screens. Now, on June 2nd, 1940 edition of the New York Times published an article, again by Ezra Goodman, looking back at the career of Edwin S. Porter. This article features a long interview with the director, and it's really a great read. In it, Goodman writes, "Made on the Lackawanna Line near Dover, New Jersey, The Great Train Robbery had the action, color, and suspense that endeared it to widespread audiences and prompted operators of Nickelodeons, which were just coming into vogue then, to show the picture time and again. It remained the most popular of all early films until Griffith came along with Birth of a Nation 11 years later." Tristan Edelman, in an article for Medium.com, would write, "Although it's often very incorrectly misidentified as the first narrative film, The Great Train Robbery certainly ushered in a new era of realism in American fiction filmmaking that was informed by British sensibilities and in turn would influence and bring low the fantastical machinations of other European creators. It's as compelling a bit of grounded drama as you'll find from these early days of cinema that Porter helped to define. The Great Train Robbery deserves its place as his most praised and well-known film because it's certainly his best, his most daring, and important." So, with that movie done, let's turn back to the PRSO for a moment. Now, they were adding fun and historically accurate interludes in between each film. You see, in the silent days, the in-house band or whoever was providing the tunes would play music while the reels were being changed to keep the crowds entertained. This film fest was no different. The Peacherine Ragtime Society Orchestra played the Piccalilli Rag from 1912 as we all eagerly awaited the next short. This was a great piece of music to enjoy since it was written by George A. Reege Jr. Now, I highlight this because Reege is a Pittsburgher, and it was a really great local note to tie in to the whole evening. Now, The next short to be featured was the 1906 Porter film, Dream of a Rarebit Fiend. This was a fun one to watch on account of its sheer wildness, both narratively and visually. Now, the basic gist of this one is a guy going on a real booze and food-fueled bender and the wild night that would commence. Or does it? We, the viewer, get to join him on this crazy, over-the-top adventure. Now, Dream of a Rarebit Fiend runs at a crisp 7-ish minutes and is an adaptation of a popular comic strip of the day by cartoonist Winsor McCay. Now, this film did a lot of cool stuff visually and probably blew a lot of minds back in the day. In fact, this film riffed on and was inspired by the popular French works of the day, putting some amazing camera trickery to great use. Lauren Rabinowitz, in an article for the Library of Congress, writes, "It infuses the dream with all the special effects contemporary cinema had to offer. It integrates stop-motion photography, split screen, and double exposure photography in order to, quote-unquote, animate inanimate objects and to create a series of fantastic scenes." Rabinowitz continues, "Adhering more to the magic tricks of a Georges Méliès film, Porter's work is less a recreation of Windsor's grandly illustrated dreamscape than an appropriation of the conceit of the dreamer and his dreams." Now, in its time, Dream of a Rarebit Fiend was a big undertaking. It took quite a bit longer to make than other films at that time. Now, the success of sales at Edison allowed Porter and Wallace McCutcheon to make more of an extravagant production than other studios were putting out at the time. And every cent they put in can be seen in this film. Now, following the film, we were treated to another interlude by the Peacherine Ragtime Society Orchestra. This one actually featured a song I was familiar with. That really caught me by surprise and gave me a new context for a song I've heard a million times. That little ditty would be The Entertainer, Ragtime Two-Step, written by Scott Joplin and released in 1902. I don't think I was the only one who was a fan of this number. This was a song that has been in the public consciousness for a long time and is pretty recognizable by general audiences. The crowd really got into it as we pretended to wait on reels being changed. Next up in our list of films is the part of our holiday discussion and our featured film of this episode, the holiday favorite and perennial part of the whole season, The Night Before Christmas. It was released on December 16th, 1905. Now, a lot of films over the years have brought the cheer and magic of Christmas to the big screen, but this literally is one of the first. And on top of that, it is the first film adaptation of Clement Moore's poem, 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, published in 1823. Technically, the poem was called A Visit from St. Nicholas, but the first line of the poem is 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, and that is where the confusion over the title comes in, with the 'twas line becoming the ubiquitous, well-known title we recognize today. While we watch this in the beautiful Edwin S. Porter Theater, there are so many other ways to watch this holiday classic. Obviously, there are the usual online go-tos of YouTube or Wikipedia. For all of you physical collectors out there, you can pick up the Kino-produced A Christmas Past set, which includes this film, amongst many other Yule-themed shorts. So, The Night Before Christmas, trademark of Thomas A. Edison. Ah, yes. The magic and charm of an Edison trademark and copyright. We all love it. Now, the film starts with jolly old St. Nicholas shoveling hay for his hard-working reindeer. This is a very bucolic nature shot, watching reindeer run around and eat. And there are a lot of those deer, way more than the traditional 9 we've been led to believe. Now we move to Santa's workshop, where he is hard at work carving a doll for a lucky boy or girl out there. He hangs it up and begins working on a sled. Santa is a real craftsman, seemingly sans elf labor here. Now, the home of the famous poem's narrator is our next scene. He is surrounded by his family, which includes, by my count, 6 children. They are all gathered around the table, anxiously awaiting Christmas and Santa's arrival. The children are writing out their lists for Santa a little late in the game for that, but Santa is magic, so you can write your lists out the night of Christmas. Now, the stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that aforementioned St. Nicholas soon would be there. In case you are skeptical of the film's claims, we see the kids hanging those stockings up. With the children gone, their mom and dad clean up a bit before heading off to bed themselves. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. They were snug. Being the rambunctious kids they were, they play around a bit and get into a pillow fight, but hop back into bed every time the maid came a-lookin'. We turn our attention back to Santa as he examines his list. And it is time for action now. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Dunder and Blitzen. Now, if you are wondering who exactly Dunder is and what happened to Donner, you are not alone. The confusion over the names of Santa's last two reindeer has been around since the writing of the poem itself. In the original 1823 version, they were Dunder and Blixen, which meant thunder and lightning respectively. In 1860 version, they become Donder, D-O-N-D-E-R, and Blitzen. The switch to Blitzen, among other reasons, allowed more to better rhyme scheme with Vixen, a line before. The modern German spelling of Donner came into use only in the early 20th century, well after Moore's death. Now, to see Santa and company roll out, we get a panoramic shot of Santa Claus riding his sleigh over hills in the moon and eventually ending up in the town. Now, this sequence used miniatures and a painted backdrop to achieve the effect of travel via flying magical reindeer. While it seems quaint now, this must have been some pretty incredibly impressive visuals back in the day. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with a sleigh of full toys and St. Nicholas too. Santa and his sack head down the chimney, where he starts placing gifts before using a little Christmas magic and manifesting a fully decorated tree for the family to discover in the morning. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. The next morning the children make their way downstairs, followed by the maid and then the parents. They are all overjoyed at what Santa Claus has left for them. They play and dance and celebrate as the film leaves us with a close-up of a cheerful St. Nick wishing us, the viewer, a very incredibly Merry Christmas. Now, this film required the use of 1,670 feet of film being shot, with 798 feet of film actually being used. So, and with that, the presents are open, Santa won the day, and Christmas was enjoyed by everyone. The crowd of the movie was having a great time and really enjoying this whole evening, but 3 Porter shorts and some in-between musical entertainment and some ye olden days seating really makes a podcaster want to get the most out of an intermission. And just because it's an intermission doesn't mean there isn't fun to be had. First, we got some intermission tunes in Swanee Rose One Step, a George Gershwin joint from 1921. Once the films and music were fully at break, we moved back into the halls, still bustling with that excitement from earlier in the evening. If anything, folks were even more thrilled and anxiously awaiting the main feature of the evening. As we roamed the venue, I made the decision to make a beeline to the drinks section, where I ordered the special drink of the night. As a beer aficionado, one doesn't simply go to a Porter Film Fest and not drink the Porter Porter. Though porters aren't my usual style of beer to drink, this one was quite good. It was created by the Yawk River Brewing Company and definitely was worth giving a try. Maybe it was the taste or just the, general ambiance of the evening. Either way, it was a great drink and great beverage inspiration to enjoy on a super cool night. After that, we continued exploring the building and enjoying the various film-related decor and obviously getting more of that great food. At this point, I have my Porter Porter in one hand and ice cream in another, with a Harold Lloyd film about to start. I was certainly living my best life at that exact moment. Now, one of the hallways had a really cool Wall of Fame situation set up. There were photos of various stars of silent film the length of the hall, up and down. Nearby was a table with blank stars where we put our names and stuck them on the wall next to the stars that we loved the most. Who do you think my star went to? Comment on this episode with your guesses as to who I starred up, and I will share the answer on our various social medias when this episode airs. Now, with our halftime shenanigans out of the way, it was time to head back to the balcony and catch my second ever Harold Lloyd film and first on a big screen. Though we haven't really covered Harold Lloyd photoplays too much on this podcast, we do have a recent episode of the show where we talk to the incredibly talented Tommy Murray about all things silent film and Harold Lloyd. So do check that out after this for some cool insights into the silent star. Now, like I always say, there is something so magical about watching films on the big screen, and this one would be no different. And when I say big screen, I mean it. You see, the Porter Theater was in desperate need of a new screen, and the community really came together to make it happen. So, a screen was ordered, but was way too big to not just get in the theater, but to hang up as well. A local company, Bailey Machine Company, donated their services to get that screen into the building. A crane truck was needed to get the 800-pound screen in through a second-floor window. Once inside, it was hung up with precision and quality that will benefit the community for years to come. This is one of the many ways the town and its citizens really stepped up to make this event an incredible reality. Now, all this talk about Lloyd, and I didn't even mention the title of the film. The final film of the night to be shown on that brand new big screen was 1925's The Freshman. The film fest took place in early September, so the air was already thick with back-to-school vibes, so it really was the perfect movie to show. So in case you didn't know, The Freshman stars Harold Lloyd and Jobina Ralston and was directed by Fred C. Newmeyer and Sam Taylor. It was released on September 20th, 1925, with a running time of 76 minutes. Not that you would know, because the time flew by as the action played out on screen. This film focuses on Harold Lloyd as a naive college freshman, Harold Lamb, who is so concerned with being the big man on campus that he forgets who he really is, until he realizes that he is good enough, smart enough, and doggone it, people like him exactly how he is. The Freshman is prime Lloyd and really shows how great he was at really creating a character the audiences care about. They weren't just laughs for laughs' sake. Stephen Weiner, in an article for the Criterion Collection website, writes, "I sometimes think of Lloyd as the Swiss watchmaker of comedy. He and his gagmen would meticulously build classic sequence after classic sequence, with every detail perfectly placed for maximum impact. Scenes like the fall frolic and the football game can be pulled out of context and played just as effectively for an audience. But seeing them embedded in the film, we discover how tightly Lloyd marries his comedy to the arc of the character's story, creating a perfect bond of laughter and recognition with his public." Now, an interesting fact about this film is that contrary to how Lloyd usually filmed his pictures, it was actually filmed in order. Usually Lloyd would film the big climax first before setting his efforts to the rest of the picture. To Lloyd, a perfect ending was the goal, and then you work backwards from there. They did that here, but Harold Lloyd shut it down, not feeling, completely in sync with the character of Speedy. The doing stuff in order would allow the comedy legend to grow with his on-screen character. One of the biggest visual delights in this flick comes at the climactic football game, where Speedy becomes a hero and wins the girl and respect of the college. According to Harold Lloyd biographer Annette D'Agostino Lloyd, no relation, we read, "For the new end, the company traveled to Northern California's Berkeley Bowl in November 1924 and shot an actual game between Stanford and the University of California, Berkeley, before a zealous pom-pom waving crowd of about 90,000. Lloyd's crew worked before the game and during halftime, with the filled stadium as the backdrop. The final close-up shots, sans crowd in the background, were later shot at an empty Pasadena Rose Bowl." Leonard Maltin would speak highly of this classic, writing, "Harold Lloyd's The Freshman isn't just funny, it's foolproof. We all love to root for an underdog, and in this masterfully constructed feature, Lloyd builds story and character hand in hand to a climax that has us cheering out loud." Leonard Maltin would speak... I just read that part. Let me move on to a later Leonard Maltin quote when the movie expert and historian continues, "Although he is remembered for his persona as an all-American go-getter, sporting horn-rimmed glasses and a straw hat, Lloyd played a variety of characters in his feature films of the 1920s, including a mama's boy, a henpecked husband, and a bored millionaire. He always won over his audiences, but the eager, wide-eyed innocent trying to make the college football team he portrays in The Freshman is irresistible. With the film completed, the lights came up throughout the theater, a sad reminder that the event was coming to a close. While the on-screen action was over, you were treated to one last musical selection from the Peacherine Ragtime Society Orchestra. They played us out with a song called The Enterpriser March, written by J. Bodewalt Lamp and released in 1911. It's tough to really quantify how much I loved this event. It was an incredible event on every level, and we here at the home office are already counting down to that second edition. From the food to the ambiance to the film selections, everything came together perfectly. And this was just the first one. I can't even imagine how it will grow and thrive as time goes on. While the Great Train Robbery is iconic and The Night Before Christmas releases all those holiday endorphins, I'd have to say my favorite Porter picture of the night was Dream of a Rarebit Fiend. This was such a surprise to me. I was not expecting what I ended up getting. It was pure fun from start to finish. The effects were wild, and it really was a conglomeration of early motion picture technique put to great use by a master technician. And I laughed out loud a lot during the short runtime of Rarebit Fiend. And I wasn't the only one. Every silly scene or joke landed with this audience. From the first film to the last, the crowd was constantly engaged. It was a hot crowd, for lack of a better word. From cheering the heroes and booing the villains, the crowd let it be known how they felt with every scene or joke. It was a great audience to be in the midst of. And yet another reason why seeing a film in a crowded theater is the top-notch, super best way to do it. As cool as everything was, it was made even better by the performance of the Peacherine Ragtime Society Orchestra. The talent on display from them was so fantastic and really added to the experience. In addition to playing music, director Andrew Green gave us a ton of insights into how music was played in the silent era and how it tied into the films of the day. It was both entertaining and informative. I know that everyone in that audience left with a new respect and appreciation for their brand of ragtime music. As we talk about our thoughts and opinions on everything, I can't move on to the next segment without praising the event one more time. At this point, what can I say that I haven't already said? I loved this event. It was a classy affair from start to finish. All of the great food and drink was fine, but at the end of the day, it was the organizer Frank Jacobianski's love of Edwin S. Porter, Connellsville, and silent film that really made this evening a success. If you want to be in the loop and get all the great Porter Film Festival news and announcements, head over to Facebook and simply search for Porter Film Fest. That will take you right to the page where you can follow and get all the info as we roll towards the second annual Porter Film Fest. We will be there next year, and most definitely, call to action time, want to see you there as well. While we are tossing out website info, we would be remiss if we didn't give a quick shout out to the Peacherine Ragtime Society Orchestra folks. They were a wonderful addition to the night and are very much worth checking out on your own. On their website, you can get merch and tour date information and learn more about them. Just head to www.peacherineragtime.com. While we are here in Connellsville, let's find out where your favorite stars are laid to rest. This is the segment where we join our favorite cinematic stars on the other side. The cemetery gates, the history, the art, the celebrity spectacle converge, and where are they now? Your guide to paying your respects to the pioneering directors that have entertained us so very much. Unfortunately, for all the love we've been showing to Connellsville all episode long, we have to turn our attention to Somerset, Pennsylvania, in order to pay our respects to the pioneering picture maker. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Porter still had a solid post-Edison career nonetheless. It was 1911 when Porter entered into a partnership with Adolph Zukor in the formation of the Famous Players Company. Like we mentioned earlier, this would be where he would direct the first 6-reel film, The Prisoner of Zenda. According to the New York Times, at that time he was doing just about everything except acting, all the camera work, script, and directing being done by himself. The paper would continue. With Famous Players, he made many of the greatest pictures of the day, including Pauline Frederick in Sold, John Barrymore in The Dictator, and Mary Pickford in Tess of the Storm Country. The latter, budgeted at only $13,000, grossed more than $1 million, more in proportion to its investment than any film ever made. Porter's final film came in 1915 with the shot in Rome production, The Eternal City. His next project would be retirement at the young age of 43. He was wealthy and more than happy to leave the hustle and bustle of the movie world. As fun as retirement can be, Porter was a busybody, not content to merely hang out. He wanted to create, though not necessarily from a director's chair. Turning back to the New York Times, we read, inactivity bored him, and in 1917 he became president of the Simplex Projector Company, supplying most of the world's theaters with his machines. Again, he retired, but after the crash of 1929, he returned to the mechanical side of the industry. His hobby in recent years has been the designing of innovations for still cameras and projectors. On the topic of some of those post-directorial career tech advancements, we turn to explorehistory.com. Their article reads, if he was content in accepting that a new generation of filmmakers like Griffith had surpassed him in vision, he never stopped working with what he liked best about the movies, its mechanics. He continued to tinker with cameras and projectors for the rest of his life, laying the groundwork for color cinematography, cinemascope, 3D, and other innovations. When he died in obscurity, essentially forgotten by the enormous juggernaut he did so much to shape. That concept of Porter dying in obscurity and being forgotten is sad but true. He would pass away on April 30th, 1941 at the age of 71. He died at his home at the Hotel Taft in New York City after a 2-year-long illness. He left a widow, Miss Caroline Porter, a sister, Ada Clark Porter, and a brother, John Thomas Porter, all of Manhattan, and 2 other brothers, Everett M. of Brooklyn and Harry Porter, a gold miner, not a wizard, in California. The funeral service was held at 2 p.m. at Cook's Funeral Parlor, 117 West 72nd Street. Edwin Stanton Porter was buried in Husband's Cemetery in nearby Somerset, Pennsylvania. He lies alongside his wife in the Porter Mausoleum. If you want to see the Pennsylvania historical marker dedicated to Porter, look no further than Connellsville. It is at the intersection of Pittsburgh Street and Fairview Avenue, and was dedicated on May 2nd, 1992. If you are familiar with Pennsylvania historical markers, you'll recognize its blue and yellow design immediately. One of the lines from his New York Times obit that really got me continues the theme we talked about in the opening. It reads, at his death, he had been forgotten by many of the present leaders in Hollywood. I mean, that's a shame that someone so pivotal to the entertainment world could be pushed aside and forgotten so easily. That, in a nutshell, is really why we do this podcast. This was truly a magic era filled with so many talented innovators and pioneers, and our goal has always been to keep those names and legacies alive for future generations. And with that, we are bringing the podcast coverage of the first ever Porter Film Festival to a close. It was a fantastic event, made even better by getting to share it with you fine listeners out there. We here at the Golden Silent Films podcast love sharing the best silent film events, Western Pennsylvania, the state, the world, all the events. We want to share those with you. Did you enjoy this Film Fest coverage of a silent film legend? What are your favorite Edwin S. Porter pictures? What are some of your favorite Edwin S. Porter innovations and inventions? Tell us all of that and more at the various social media spots of the Golden Silent Films podcast. On that note, if you have forgotten, we are on Instagram and Twitter /X and Bluesky. Let us know what you think of this episode. What silent and silent-related movies, past or present, do you want us to look at next? Our world of silent movie knowledge and experience is constantly expanding, and we need your input for our future episodes here and beyond as we continue into 2025. You can always find us at Golden Silence Cast on Instagram and at Golden Silence 1 on Twitter and Golden Silence Cast on Bluesky. And we're also waiting to have you along on YouTube. And again, if you listen to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or any other podcast outlet that allows it, subscribe, rate, and review. If you are watching here on YouTube, like, subscribe, and comment. It does a lot for our visibility, and we love hearing your thoughts and ideas. We really, really, really appreciate all of your incredible support, and seeing how much you folks are listening only makes us want to make bigger and better and more festival-worthy episodes. So with all that being said, thank you to all of you fine listeners for all of your fine listening. And don't forget, the silents are golden and the talkies are just a fad. and Merry Christmas. In talking to Porter, writer Ezra Goodman gets a look at how the film world changed throughout Porter's legendary career from the man himself. Goodman writes, "As for Hollywood, I rarely see pictures anymore," Porter confesses. He has lost most of his interest in movie making, has not even visited the Museum of Modern Art Film Library a few blocks away, where his cinematic work is enshrined together with that of Griffith, Chaplin, and Fairbanks. He feels that though pictures have indubitably made tremendous strides forward since his time, much of the initiative and excitement has gone out of movie making. What with the director's work cut out for him and with various experts and front office moguls handling each and every phase of the separate technical, artistic, and business departments, it was otherwise in his day.